In this next module, we're going to engage in an activity that we call Who's at Risk? And in this activity, we're going to take some time to explore the ideas of exposure and vulnerability that Dr. Carrera-Zamanillo introduced. On the next page of the module, there are some written directions for the activity, but during this video, I'm actually going to walk you through the steps that you'll be taking so that you can get an idea of what the work will look like. So on the next page of the module, you will be assigned a climate-related hazard based on the first letter of your last name, and that's the hazard that you're going to focus on for this activity. There is also a link to a Google slide deck similar to the one that you see on your screen right now. And so you're going to navigate to that slide deck, and that's where you're going to complete the work. A couple things to pay attention to. On slide 2, there are the definitions for exposure and vulnerability that we're using for this activity. Exposure being your likelihood to encounter climate-related hazards. Think about location like where you live, work, play. And vulnerability is all about your ability to withstand and recover from climate-related hazards. So these include things like economic and social factors, race, health, language. When you get to the slide deck, there should already be some slides that have a Venn diagram in the background, and we're going to use these Venn diagrams to explore and unpack exposure and vulnerability to think about how the overlap of these categories contribute to one's risk. So find a slide that has a diagram but no other text on it, and you can use that to do your writing. But if you go to the slide deck and you can't find a slide that hasn't already been used by another participant, then you're going to have to add a new slide by going up to the toolbar, clicking on slide, and then going down to new slide. When you add a new slide, you should already see the Venn diagram in the background. But just in case if you don't, then you're going to have to change the layout of the slide. So to do that, click on the slide that you added that does not have the Venn diagram, right-click and go to Apply Layout. And then be sure to select the blank slide template. That one already has the Venn diagram in the background, and we'll be using text boxes to add our ideas on top of that. So the first thing that you want to do is use a text box to write the name of the hazard that you were assigned at the top. This is kind of like your title. So for the purpose of our work here, I'm going to do an example, and I'm going to think about exposure and vulnerability for COVID-19. Now, you can, of course, change the size of the font. You can change the font itself. You make those design decisions. Once you have your title at the top, we will use text boxes again to create some space to write our ideas for exposure and vulnerability. So I'm going to start with thinking about exposure for COVID-19. And again, reminding myself, this has to do with, where location, where we work, where we live. So I do know that, of course, for COVID-19, residents of long-term care facilities have increased exposure. Let's try and get out of caps lock, maybe. I also know that people that are incarcerated have increased exposure to COVID-19. I know, of course, that essential workers and those that needed to work in public places with lots of other people around had increased exposure. I also might think about folks that relied on public transportation and did not have their own personal vehicle, had increased exposure. So I will, continue carrying out my ideas and writing down my thoughts for exposure until I feel like I have done that adequately. And then I will insert a text box to explore vulnerability for the same hazard. So taking some time to remind myself that vulnerability has to do with one's ability to withstand the hazard itself. So for vulnerability, as far as COVID-19 goes, I do know that people that are older than 65 have increased vulnerability. I also know that people that have pre-existing health conditions, that plays a big role in your vulnerability. I also know that people who speak limited or no English have increased vulnerability since they may not have the same kind of access to important health and care information. And again, I'll take some time to continue adding my ideas to exposure and vulnerability. And again, the point here is for us to think about who's at most risk by looking at where the categories for exposure and vulnerability overlap. So someone might have really high exposure but low vulnerability, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're automatically in a high risk category. Because we're really looking for where high exposure and high vulnerability overlap leads to high risk. So you will take some time to build out a slide for your climate-related hazard. And then you're also going to take some time to explore the slides that were added by other participants, which will include climate-related hazards that are different than the one that you focused on. So take some time to look through those and try to focus your reflection on who's most at risk for these hazards. Are you seeing any commonalities and similarities between and among the hazards? And you'll be asked to reflect on that on another page later on in the module.